boy. All right. Hello, Alex. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All right.
Wait a minute.
You seemed a little bit unsure if you were feeling well or not, or doing well, I should say.
I'm just looking at the fuzzy image, but I can't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't get a better one.
Well, we can use the audio. Yeah, I remember.
Oh God. Okay.
Alrighty. Hopefully the audio will suffice. We can just use audio anyway, because that's fine. Well, I guess we could start with where we left off with the press gang a few weeks ago, or a couple months back.
Sure.
And you were telling me that I guess at the time this was being printed, correct?
Yes. Right.
So it's finally arrived. Make Spielberg great again. I guess the first thing that I remember, we started talking about it even during that conversation, how you and Spielberg, both of your careers coincided, and that was sort of part of what drove you to put together these the reviews and articles from over the years.
Well, yeah. Sure. Well,
the time frame itself, right?
Well, yeah. It came together that way. I've been embarking on a series of books about artists I care about. I call them chronicles, and I did one on Michael Jackson. I did one on Prince, and Spielberg is the first filmmaker I've done it for. Where in each one of those chronicles, I collect the writings I've done on that artist throughout my career. Just so happens, though, unlike Prince and Michael Jackson, my writing career coincided with Spielberg's theatrical filmmaking career. So I felt that this was a good parallel and a good way to chart both of our movements over all that time from '74 on.
Yeah, right. What is that like for you? Do you have any? Is it typical for you to look back at your early writings regardless, or what was it like putting this together? Do you connect still with that writer from the mid '70s?
Oh yeah, I'm the same person, and in the case of Spielberg, my opinions and my feelings about his movies have not changed from the beginning, except in one particular case. I feel the way about his movies that I always did.
Okay, can I guess? Was that Jaws or?
No, I'm still
okay.
not a great Jaws fan. I recognize the skill in it. I recognize the wit in it and the intelligence as well. That's never changed. The films that I have a changed feeling about are 1941 and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Those two, but especially 1941, I guess.
Well, to a more positive feeling for it.
Yes, in both those cases. Temple of Doom. Every time I see it, I think more and more of it, and I've come to accept what 1941 is, and that's a positive thing. When I first saw it in 1979, I was thrown by it. It seemed, well, coming right after the masterful Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I expected Spielberg to do a kind of Griffith, Langian, Antonioni kind of thing. My regard for his seriousness knew no limit after Close Encounters. So I expected the next film to be serious, in that same sense, and it wasn't. It was different. It's a comedy, which threw me at first. I've come to accept that now. So
Well,
that's,
it couldn't have been just the fact that it was a comedy. Maybe it was also because, I mean, it's one of those big sloppy. Well,
well, never sloppy. Just
it's I should say messy.
full
It's
of,
a mess of a film in a some level. It's tonally maybe or otherwise. It's kind of it does. I don't look at maybe sloppy isn't the right word. Sloppy is definitely got a absolute negative connotation, whereas messy is a little different in my mind. It mess can be it actually almost like a positive thing sometimes. You know, it's sometimes it's refreshing to watch a big messy movie if it's
yeah.
if getting at something.
I don't respond to messy, but it's kind of in itself. It's a carnival. There's a lot of things going on in it, and sometimes Spielberg, I've noticed at certain points of his career, he has a fondness for for big explosions, big for a carnival-esque show business attitude of overloading what he does, and that's what I've come to accept in 1941. I wasn't ready for it in 1979. The movie hasn't changed. My attitude towards it has changed, and toward positive acceptance of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples maybe where that impulse that you're describing with 1941 comes up again.
Well, I can
You
put it.
seen it?
I can give you this example. Right after
Yeah.
1941, Spielberg made his appearance in John Landis's The Blues Brothers, and he makes his appearance in The Blues Brothers probably at the climactic point of that film's Hell's a Poppin' Hullabaloo, because I think something about making a Hell's a Poppin' Hullabaloo appeals to Spielberg, and it's right. Obviously, it's right there in 1941. I just wasn't willing to accept it when I first saw it. But I get that that's part of that's part of his filmmaking personality. That's one of the kinds of humor that he genuinely responds to, uh, massive kineticism and activity, uh, nonstop. Even bits of that poke through in The Color Purple, and that's where it's kind of atonal. But I would differ with the idea of ever calling his work messy or out of tone. He's always, as a filmmaker, always in control of his tone and knows exactly what he's going for all the time, which I think is part of what makes him a remarkable filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when you're being very ambitious and the film maybe falls short of succeeding with all your ambitions, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at when I say messy.
Oh.
You
All right.
know, like, but
I don't even messy as a negative or a pejorative. I can't
yeah,
I cannot apply that to 1941. I just think it's
yeah,
full of lots of activity, lots of comic business as
right.
in vaudeville. And
Um,
I was expecting the great spiritual master of Close Encounters to continue in that vein, but he showed me that there's more to him than that.
well, the title, which is sort of carries with it a certain amount of connotation, "Make Spielberg Great Again." It's a very specific title, obviously, not only because it makes reference to "Make America Great Again," but it's also critical of Spielberg. So you're leading with being critical in the title.
Yes. Well, as one reads through the book and as those pieces were assembled, uh, a certain fact arises, and that is a certain decline in his filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Not ever a technical decline, but I think
No.
he's lost a certain fundamental touch with popular popular experience and popular taste as his latest films have gotten more political as well.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this was an intriguing thing at the beginning of his career, in the middle of his career, and it's become, I think, an unfortunate thing more recently.
But it seems to me, right, from reading those earlier articles,
Mhm.
that what you connected so deep, what you were moved by was his ability, is a level of unabashed, unapologetic humanity. You know, um, it can sometimes get awfully close to sentimentality, but he sort of has a, as you already said, he's a master of tone typically, and so you can kind of avoid that. Um, you know, but it's this sheer um, level of humanity in the films.
Right. Well, that was always very moving
Yeah.
in his first films, and certainly up to and including Warhorse.
Uh-huh.
And after that, I think his films became much more politically focused, and the
Yeah.
undeniable,
He
the irrefutable humanism of his films uh, were overtaken
is
by
lost.
making political
Yeah.
points.
Being ideological.
Yes, sure. And
Um,
that I considered a decline, and I would want him to return to the former humane greatness.
um, and he has taken bigger risks than most people may recall. I mean, also, because you think of him on the surface as somebody who's typically, because of maybe the amount of power and influence and money he has at his fingertips, but I remember very specifically when The Color Purple came out, and how controversial it was that that he made this film, and I'm trying to remember who are the people that were having a problem with it. I don't
Uh,
I
most
don't remember anymore, except for maybe film
most
critics.
most mainstream film critics had a problem with it.
Yeah.
The public never did, by and large. The public never
Right.
did,
Yeah.
and I guess we could measure it to some degree by the film's 11 Academy Award nominations. That suggests that there was some sort of admiration for it,
Yeah.
and of course, it did not
But
win a single one of those 11 nominations. So then you can almost read that as a kind of rejection or criticism of the film. But overall, the nominations mean people liked it. It's just critics who didn't like it, because it's always been the case with Spielberg that most critics think they're smarter than he is. Uh, they think they're not they're above sentimentality, they're above emotion, which is, I think, the basic reason why quote intellectual unquote critics don't like his work and
mhm.
superior to it. But it's
And
their
there's a resentment too that he participated in the commercialization, the steroidal level of commercialization of the movie industry, right?
yeah.
Jaws.
Well,
Maybe there was a
I think one of the themes that emerges in the book, in the collection of writing, is that most film reviewers don't understand the medium they're writing about. They don't understand that commercial filmmaking, which in a sense is to say popular filmmaking, can be a good thing. And throughout the
Mhm.
book, I make, I think, essential analogies between Spielberg and G.W. Griffith. And
I noticed, yeah.
I want to stress the point for those who are not aware that filmmaking can be a popular art form, and that this is when American filmmaking is at its best. Griffith is an example of that. Spielberg is an example of that. So-called intellectual critics don't realize that, which is why they, I think, condemn what they see as Spielberg's commercialism. But yes, he's working in a commercial industry, but he functions as an artist in that industry, as a popular artist who respects the intelligence of his audience, as Griffith did. He never directs films simply to make money. Every film he has directed is a film that expresses some aspect of his personality and his experience.
it doesn't seem like he's controversial anymore in that way, that the film critics seem to have fully embraced him. Maybe your point is emphasized by the fact that, or that is because proof rather, that maybe this came about the time of Lincoln, maybe a little earlier than that, where all of a sudden now, he's fully embraced by, as he's become more of an ideologically driven filmmaker, storyteller, that now the critics find him, to be faultless. They embraced Lincoln. They embraced The Post, as far as I can remember. These films.
Yes, and
right.
Sad to say, most reviewers are wrong again. Once they've come to embrace Spielberg, it's when his films are less effective, less good, less well thought out. Even the most recent films that got a controversial critical response, I'd say, were Munich and Crystal Skull and possibly Tintin. And these are among his most, I think these are among his most fascinating films. But, uncomprehending critics don't get them. They praise junk like The Post. And The Post is not commercial junk. The Post is purely ideological junk. But that's that's what reviewers like, because their own politics are appeased by that film, and they forget how shoddy the thinking is in it, and the lack of, I would say, the lack of humanity that's in it.
I see, right. And then it's also in the same sort of, you have the position that when it comes to D.W. Griffith, who you brought up, that they will look back at now and look at the guy who made The Birth of a Nation, right, and call him a racist filmmaker.
Yeah. Right, and that's just a simplistic and ignorant response to that film. They don't know, anyone who says that about Birth of a Nation doesn't know Birth of a Nation, and they come to it with preformed judgments. They don't respond to it as a work of art, and it's a complicated work of art for sure. But to just dismiss it as racist is not to understand it.
But he was punished by stripping his name from.
Yes. An unfortunate event that Spielberg signed on to. In fact,
he did.
Which I guess was the beginning of his decline. In a way. Oh yes.
Yeah.
This was, I believe, it was 1989, so, or 98 or 99, around then. And the Directors Guild decided to, at the urging of one of its lesser members, to take D.W. Griffith's name off the Directors Guild awards. Signed on to it, as if that profession, as if that guild would ever exist without Griffith. And I mean, that was, in a way, that was an example of the beginning of cancel culture.
Right. Still. Yeah. Yeah, which also just kind of serves to erase what happened and without looking at it closely. And so instead of turning it into maybe an opportunity for conversation, for debate, for discourse, you're just erasing it from history altogether.
Sure. And that's the kind of politics that has ruined his latest films. That he seems to be trying to appease a certain political faction, rather than instructing people, reminding people of their own humanity, of their own complex humanity, and of reminding people of what art can do, what art can reveal to us.
I know. Speaking of which,
pardon me.
Sorry, Armond. I was just having an argument with my son last night over this, because he's, for now the second or third time he's being he's assigned to read To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right.
And I understand, this is about. Now he's coming out here. And he knows who you are, Armond. Do you want to tell Armond yourself? Sorry to embarrass you. He's familiar with your work apparently.
Good. Hey, all right.
He describes you as the critic who disagrees with all the other critics. Somehow he knows that. I don't know how he learned that. Didn't come from me. But
No,
you know, it's
I wear that as a badge of honor.
I know. That's why I can tell you. I felt I could share that with you. But well, you know, it's this whole idea of what, you know, just to make him comfortable when, you know, and I makes me comfortable too, to replace the N-word by saying the N-word,
Mm-hmm.
you know, which is used throughout the book, you know, but to me, it's kind of nuts because if you look at it as if you erase it, then you're not representing truth, and you're removing the opportunity to have a more you know, nuanced conversation about racism, et cetera, and knowing what people were like during that time and how, you know, people spoke. So, you know, it's I kind of look at it similarly to the removing of like the name of D.W. Griffiths, for instance, who was at his time in the 20s like Spielberg stature, right? In the culture.
Right. Yes, he was the first great American filmmaker, and as I like to think of him, as the first great populist artist, because he understood what people wanted from art and what art could give them, which essentially is a deeper understanding of themselves and an understanding of how they are like others. And when the culture starts to censor works of art, even at the middle brow level of To Kill a Mockingbird, they take away that beautiful function of art, that the beautiful way that art can reveal ourselves to ourselves and reveal others to ourselves. And to try to make art politically correct is to censor it and to produce propaganda, not art. So taking Griffith's name away from the Directors Guild Awards, taking words out of Killer Mockingbird and even Huckleberry Finn, is
right.
to damage the art and also to mar or to insult the intelligence of the reader.
Compromise. Oh well, yeah, for sure.
And you know, of all professions, school teachers should be the first to be against that.
That's right.
But as we recently see, a lot of teachers are out for themselves more than anything else, or out they become ideological as well.
Well, there's a lot of pressure. It's tantamount now. You know, we know that it's at a level that's kind of insane. So any pushback is really, you have to admire anybody pushes back against it because it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, maybe the pendulum will swing back to some degree. I was thinking about it the around the time, in fact, because The Color Purple came out, what year?
85.
85. So you're
1985.
talking about 1985,
yes.
Which is really at the cusp of this first real wave of politically correct culture. I think mid 80s was really becoming a major thing in our culture, politically correct language on campuses. Would you say?
Oh, I don't know when I can. It's hard to remember when it wasn't there, but sure.
Our perspectives may be a little different. It's true, but I just remember it really kind of getting. And so I look at like Spielberg's, when The Color Purple came out, was an example of where I don't even think people had developed a real sort of language for it yet, except for saying this should be made by a Black filmmaker. And I wonder if he, on some level, even though he was rewarded for The Color Purple, and it was a really powerful film, if it didn't still have some sort of effect on him going forward, you know.
I worry that what might have had an effect on Spielberg were the accusations that the film was inauthentic or sentimental, and that he might have responded to that poorly by not returning to to a black subject again. And I think he might have listened to the wrong people. And
Mm.
he should pay attention. He should pay attention instead to the
Well,
enormous popularity of The Color Purple, which has never waned. Um, the book is has a dedication in it, and I'm willing to explain that to you. It has to do with this question. Uh, the It's dedicated to Melvin Van Peebles,
yeah.
and here's why. Back when The Color Purple came out in '85, it was controversial. So-called intellectual critics didn't like it, and a lot of politically correct black people.
I think you're referring
As I
possibly to Spike Lee, but go ahead.
as I joke, well, not well, better and other than him, uh, I refer to these folks as spokespeople. Some black spokespeople didn't like it, and so there was controversy about it. And I appeared at a panel discussion in Harlem about the film, and I also did a there was a black TV show, public affairs show here in New York that I appeared on, and there were a number of spokespeople on that panel. And there was also Melvin Van Peebles on the panel. Although Melvin Van Peebles was not in the studio, he was via satellite. And the host of the show went around the panel and asked each of us our opinions on The Color Purple. And then when he got to Melvin Van Peebles, I think the host felt that I've got a good question here.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to finish the movie with Melvin, the controversial Melvin Van Peebles.
Right. You're going to get some good television now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he said, Melvin, don't you wish you should have had the opportunity to direct The Color Purple? And Melvin Van Peebles gave an answer that I loved then, love now, shows his genius. He said, I only wish I could have directed it as well as Spielberg did.
Mm.
And by that answer, Melvin Van Peebles showed me and showed everyone that he understood what art is for. And he also happened to understand Spielberg's art. And he realized and he knew that The Color Purple was quite an achievement, beautifully done, intelligently done. And I think Melvin Van Peebles' answered all Spielberg's critics, I think, definitively.
Just go in to the movie. Try not to go in with preconceptions. Very difficult to do, especially if you're interested in cinema. You read about cinema, you're gonna hear things. But if you go in and have your pure emotional experience, and you come out and you're honest, that's your point, right? What is that? That's what you should be in touch with.
Yes, that's part of my point, because I think I like to refer to Van Peebles' response, his lack of envy and his admiration, because I think he also understood that Spielberg didn't only make an emotionally effective film and artistically effective film, but he made a film that was aesthetically radical, as many of Melvin Van Peebles' films have been. I think he understood that and respected that, because so I'm saying one can go into The Color Purple and simply respond to it as soap opera, which is not a pejorative. I mean that with the highest respect. But one could also look at it for its modernist sophistication, because it's full of all the things that Spielberg and the filmmakers, the American Renaissance filmmakers, as I call them, of his generation, it's full of things that they know about the history of art, the history of cinema, and how throughout cinematic history, women, black people, have been portrayed, and how their experiences can be transmitted to others. The film is full. I mean, it tells the story that Alice Walker wrote in her novel, but it's also full of references, plain references to Griffith, to John Ford, to Douglas Sirk. It's full of them, and I think that's part of the sophistication that Melvin Van Peebles also acknowledged.
I said before, I think Color Purple may have the backlash may have had made him a little uneasy rather, or perhaps, but it also opened him up. He really never made he going forward. He could not erase his own personal growth, having made that film and having taken such a leap and not made something so safe. Safe in the sense of this is his, this is in his, you know, set of tools that, like E.T., even 1941, Close Encounters, the first Raiders of the Lost Ark. But then going forward, he kind of realized he has an incredible opportunity, maybe even an obligation. I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like that definitely impacted, or had an impact on his sequels to Indiana Jones movies and other films also.
I think he said in some interview that he could not have made Schindler's List if he had not done The Color Purple first. And I think The Color Purple was also, in a way, it was a way for him to learn how to deal with ideas about race and oppression, and so it was a very necessary project for him to embark upon, to expand his own filmmaking, to expand his thinking as a human being. And he did it successfully, and that led him into, I think, as he said, it led him to Schindler's List.
Can you pinpoint when things? I know you said it was maybe with what was it? Was it with Lincoln where kind of he got off track, or maybe?
No, it was all good up until Lincoln. Lincoln is the turning point. That's where it went sour.
You even write a piece about his short documentary about Obama.
Right. That's post Lincoln. Yes.
Yeah.
And no, I know. Lincoln's where it went sour. Lincoln is the most blatantly ideological film that he had made to that point, and that has to do. Has to do with his obviously has to do with his collaboration with the screenwriter of Lincoln, Tony Kushner, with whom they had collaborated very nicely on Munich. It was also a very controversial film for among Spielberg haters, but I think a very strong and effective film, not just as a kind of Jewish ethnic expression, but also as an expression, as a film dealing with the morality, with the morals involved in politics, and with the morality of killing, to be specific. And so Tony Kushner, his collaboration with Tony Kushner on Munich was very effective. But then somebody got full of themselves on the second collaboration. I think it was Kushner.
His agenda,
his admittedly communist agenda on Spielberg, and a communist agenda that also included a negative view of American history, and that's where the trouble started with Spielberg's career, I think.
There hasn't been any point of redemption since.
No. All the films afterwards then seem to each trying to be more ideological than the last, more America critical than the previous one, and that's unfortunate. And then Lincoln is where it went wrong, because Lincoln obviously is not merely a film about Abraham Lincoln. It's also clearly a veiled film about Barack Obama, and the politics associated with that are undeniable. And even though it took the writers of the New York Times a full year to realize it, they're undeniable. And it's that kind of Obama idolatry that then began to shrink the humanism in Spielberg's work.
Well, again, your book is called "Make a Spielberg Great Again: The Steven Spielberg Chronicles." You started with Sugarland Express, which was his first feature, 1974. Which was written for the South End. What was that?
The South End is the newspaper for my undergraduate college, Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. And I was the film critic there and the arts editor there throughout
Wow.
my undergraduate years. And
Did you have your driver's
hmm?
license? I said you probably were just barely out of your teens then.
Well, after high school, sure,
Yeah.
uh,
Uh, did you have? Did you up to that point? Were you thinking about being a critic? Were you thinking about writing?
oh, I'd responded to film criticism rather early. I think in high school when I came across "Kiss Kiss Bang Bang" by Pauline Kael,
Uh-huh.
and I realized that movies could be written about in an intelligent way, in a serious way,
Mm-hmm.
and that that was a revelation to me, and it made me want to do that, and not just about movies though. My other cultural passion is
Right.
popular music. So
True.
I understood that one could write about the art that one enjoyed, movies and music, in an intelligent way, and not as a as a consumer guide, but one could write about one's personal feelings about movies, and also in criticism, try to explore my own response to film. And so, you know, when I don't mind that your son says I'm the one who doesn't agree with other critics, uh, the basic point of that is that I'm most other reviewers don't consider criticism seriously. They don't think it's an art form, and I do think it's an art form, and I do think it's something to be taken seriously. And I do think it's not just writing about one's response to the product that Hollywood is selling. I'm always trying to understand the movie that I'm dealing with and try to figure out how it works and
Contextually,
to
etc.
figure out my response to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's what I always wanted to do. I didn't ever want to put my thumbs up or down about a movie. I didn't want to leave it at that. I wanted to write about movies as a way of personal expression, and as a way of dealing with a very rich and complex art form.
How do you think Spielberg might respond to your book or to your thesis?
Well, I would love him to consider it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's enough indication that I understand what he's doing for him to take it seriously and to know that I'm not a shill. I'm not here to
Right.
praise him. I'm here to respect his artistry and deal with it in a serious manner.
Did you? Were you?
In the back in
Go ahead.
the last entry in the press gang book, I write about my my address to the New York Film Critics Circle in the last year that I was chairman there, and I quote Annette Benning's speech at that particular awards ceremony. And Annette Benning says I thought, very thoughtful thing. Essentially, she says that critics and filmmakers are not enemies; that they need each other. That's a kind of symbiotic relationship. And I think that's the way that criticism ought to be understood and appreciated. Um, Nobody's paying me to praise filmmakers and to congratulate them for being rich folks who get to do what they want to do. My job as a critic is to function within the culture with filmmakers, and to try to understand what they're doing, and to try to be honest enough with the public to let the public know that you have a responsibility as a viewer to be thinking as you watch movies, and that as a thinking viewer you should demand that filmmakers be honest, and that filmmakers be as creative as possible, and not fall for cliches, not fall for formula, and to be a thoughtful viewer.
Well, and of course, you can't really make those demands unless you're willing to make them for yourselves as a critic, right?
Sure, sure.
Is your point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sit in one seat. I see with my own pair of eyes, no one else's.
Um, and I think I think Spielberg would probably be, if he took that scenario where you just go in and you have a very authentic experience and you try to filter out any kind of other entity or people's opinions, and you just have that experience. If he read your book of reviews and got out of his own way, maybe he would see just how deeply you care about him as an artist, and would be open to your idea, your criticism of him, ultimately.
Well, he should.
Yeah.
He should.
So therefore, I'm urging you to send him a copy if you haven't already done it.
Well, he should. You know what? Another film critic who I think of as a mentor is Andrew Sarris, and I remember Sarris commenting one time about a book of criticism, saying that he didn't understand why one would waste one's time writing an entire book about a filmmaker you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I can see it, but I like the fact that Sarah said it that way, and there's something to it. And so I didn't write a book as a Spielberg basher. This is a book of respect for serious artists, and with serious concern about how he has gone wrong. And of course, there's always a possibility for redemption. There's always a possibility for improvement. And gosh, there's a possibility that he can shake off the bad influence of Tony Kushner and make great films again. Make films that are full of vision in terms of how human beings behave, the mystery of humanity, and the wonder of filmmaking, which is what he has in common with D.W. Griffith. More people need to see Griffith's films to not just to understand this point that I'm making, but to understand what's possible in cinema. I wrote a piece on Griffith's intolerance for National Review a couple of years back on the centennial of Intolerance. I still think it's the greatest film ever made, and not enough people know it. Unfortunately, the ideologues they hear the name Griffith, and the first thing they say is The Birth of a Nation, but they know nothing about his greatest film, and people should know that. Spielberg, I bet, knows it.
I bet so. Yeah.
I guess I'm working up to that point. My favorite Griffith quote, where he says, "My aim is to make you see," and I can't think of any contemporary filmmaker whose movies are so visually exciting and astounding as Spielberg's have been. Frankly, going to a Spielberg movie when they were great was always like an adventure in using your eyes and seeing exactly what that widescreen in front of you could display. And that's just about a lost art these days. It would be wonderful if he got it back. If he got his groove back.
Well, you can get a copy of Make Spielberg Great Again, I suppose, where books are sold.
Well, at Amazon. They're sold there.
Okay, at Amazon. That's basically where books are sold these days, I assume.
That's true.
It's published by the Resistant Works. And is it? Did they publish your Prince book too? Yes, and your
the Prince book also, and Michael Jackson book.
What's? Can I ask? Is it? Do you know what your next collection will be? Or
I got several ideas. I've got several ideas that I'm working on. So I'd like not to say them now, or else it'll take some of the impact.
Understood. Sure.
But God willing, there's another to come. There's more to come.
Well, thanks for chatting today, and glad we were able to work it out.
Thank you for asking, and thanks for reading. I love to have a reader. That's so.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you opened my eyes to some things as well, and you kind of gave words to some of my feelings about Spielberg. I don't think my expectations were where yours were, and maybe and the disappointment, but but I really can appreciate it.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean disappointment?
Oh, I just mean, well, you know how he sort of has maybe turned a corner that you're unhappy with. And I'm just like, maybe I didn't have him as one of my guys, you know, so he didn't, I mean, I honestly, I don't really remember Lincoln too well, but, which says a lot, I suppose. But, and then certainly I did not care for the Post or for Radio American, what is it called, Radio Player One rather. But yeah, I sort of felt, but I didn't feel a disappointment in Spielberg at the same time. Is all I'm trying to say, because I don't think I had it was thinking along in those terms, you know.
Well, what film of his do you like the best?
I would have to say that I still am, like, I showed Close Encounters to my son.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was earlier this year or late last year. I can't remember exactly. And it still really just had a huge, you know, it still held as much power as it did. It holds up, you know. Just it's just such an exciting thing to watch, an experience.
Yeah, I sure get that. And I ask you that because to me, basically, one way of understanding the mission of the book, the title of the book, is that what he achieved in Close Encounters he has not been achieving lately.
No.
And in fact, I would say that the level of vision in Close Encounters is pretty much like the kind of vision that is in War of the Worlds. But and that's, I think, is another example of, and as well as AI. And I think those are two of his late career peaks, even though critics didn't seem to like either of those, as I think back on it now.
I know. I was always surprised. I thought War of the Worlds was terrific. I remember really enjoying that.
Oh yes, I think it's enormously powerful, and
what can you do?
It's almost hard. It's almost hard to take. I find it so effective. I think a kind of dream or nightmarish response, I think, to 9/11, and all of those feelings and emotions, I think, are in it. But he finds a way to do it as a visionary filmmaker, telling a particular kind of story, and he's not at that level recently. So he's got to get back. He ought to get.
And there's certainly no lack of, you know, contexts for making something to respond to right now. Yeah, what we're going through as a country, as a world, there's a lot there.
And you know, another thing that I think that I'm glad, I think is chronicled and captured in the book is a developing appreciation that I've had for Spielberg's work. When I, in the Color Purple section of the book, there is a late piece in it that I wrote for Out Magazine, where I talked specifically about the Color Purple as a queer film, as a lesbian film. And these are ideas that I appreciated in 1985, but in the 2000s, those ideas are even more to be appreciated. And I think that's an example of what is great about Spielberg's humanism, that people who undervalue him don't quite appreciate. And so I was glad to be able to return to the Color Purple and point that out.
I've been meaning to, since I read your book, I've actually been meaning to look at it again.
Yeah, and also to say
it's always a good thing
that you know, the themes, the subject of the Color Purple were not done for political reasons. He made that film because he felt it, and he needs to get back to that rather than ideological. Because he's smart enough. He's smart enough, as the Color Purple proves, smart enough to do it the right way.
It's a yeah, it's an incredibly I don't know, uh, just an ebullient film.
Oh, sure. Full of emotion and
Yeah, lots of emotion.
and vision and intelligence about film art
Right.
and full of great feeling. The scene towards the end, one of the last scenes where the Seeley character, she says a simple word that I find to be so moving. She says a family, and that's not something that is not something that Black Lives Matter cares for, but it's something that is essential to all of us. And there it is in The Color Purple. And it would be great if Spielberg could get back to regain the confidence of saying that to the popular audience again, that the family matters.
There it is. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad to talk to you about it. Thank you.
You bet. Next time we'll do it again.
Okay, cool. All right. Be good.
You too. Have a good evening ahead.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.